to open session.
And you already did that, so we will consider ourselves back in.
Okay,
Yeah,
I forgot I did that.
It's okay to do it again. So, we're back in the open session. Do we have a motion on the Mark Dennis property?
Do you want to hear my
honestly-
Yes, could you,
A motion was made to authorize Mayor J.R. Byrd to enter into negotiations and acquire property owned by Mark Dennis that would connect Constitution Park property with the animal shelter property, then bring it to council for final approval.
perfect.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Good motion, Dave. That's an excellent motion.
That's how Central Utah is. They write it all out for you and you just read it. So, do we have a second? Okay, second by Councilman Allen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes and we'll get working on that. And then once we get close to an agreement, we'll bring it back to council and get final approval. So, one other thing before we go, is just, I wanted to make, I forgot in my report, just the animal shelter. That's been something that has kind of been blown up and blown out of proportion on social media. I wish I had my notes here. Some of the things that were addressed were the hours that they were, how many hours are allowed based on our budget, those types of things. There was some misrepresentation on whether or not we're a kill shelter. We haven't been a kill shelter, and thanks to Melissa and Forever Buddies, but we haven't been a kill shelter for years and years, and we don't want to be. We have a good working relationship with them, but when we did budget cuts and those types of things all across the board, they were one of those that we did cut, and proportionately one of the least that was cut. And the budget was only cut, and this is for the public if anybody's watching, the budget was cut $17,000. $15,000 of that was an employee that was laid off, and the police department are going to pick up the slack as far as dog catching and those types of things. So ultimately, the budget was actually cut $2,000, but it was also reinforced that we need to stick within our budget because we've been going over budget by about $40,000 every year. So we sat down with Melissa and Rose today and several others. We had Kurt there, we had our legal counsel there, we had our HR director there talking about, the difference, what the laws are and how this is all going to work in an agreement, an operating agreement, and a memorandum of understanding that we can have between Forever Buddies and Roosevelt City so that we don't ever become a kill shelter. And so we're working through those. I think there was a lot of misrepresentation, a lot of maybe confusion or and how rumors spread. But ultimately, they have been asked to stick within that budget. They have been reduced by $2,000. We looked at it and said, we will allow them a few more hours. We're going to work that into the budget. But then we've really put it on a lot of other contingencies and things like that to really increase our efficiencies there and get an idea of what our money's been spent on and how well it's being ran and everything else. So we're going through policies and procedures manuals, and we're going through the whole thing, and everything will be straightened out. And it'll be really good for not only Melissa, but the police department, but those that work there, when they come in, they will have a manual of policies, procedures that will be adhered to, and everybody will do things systematically in the same way, and so it'll be good. And it's way past due that we've done something like this. I think they've been one of those entities that have been out there kind of on their own for so long. When we brought them in today, they didn't really have a clue about Polaris. They didn't know about our billing system. There was a lot of things resources that they could have been taking advantage of that would help them, but they didn't know, and that goes both ways. Communications on both sides were just lacking. And so monthly meetings, and meeting with department head or whoever's in charge, Sean Denver, being one that's been assigned there, making sure that that communication stays intact, let them know that Melissa Jurgensen's there. If they have any problems, not to go to Facebook, but to go to her and get those problems resolved through our HR. That's what she's there for. And Melissa always updates the council and us on those issues. And so if they're not feeling like they're being heard with their department head, they can go to Melissa. Ultimately, the council will hear about those and we can address those issues that way. And so it's unfortunate the misinformation that's been out there. I don't know what we do at this point as far as the city to try to remedy that. A lot of it you just can't. But what I found interesting is we're not really changing a lot of like we're changing the procedure, not as much the end result. So the end result is going to be very similar as far as what the budget will be and everything else. We only allowed 8 more hours and everybody felt that was adequate. And so we'll work with that anyway. It's just interesting. I just want to give an update real quick on that. Do you have anything to add, Ryan or Kurt?
You did awesome.
Yeah, I would just say thank you, Mayor, for going in and working with that. I visited with Ryan earlier today and appreciated how things were done. And you know, for me personally, I didn't judge based on what Facebook said. I came in to find out the actual story. And I think we should always make sure we do that. Get all the facts before we make the decision, because people tend to be rash and say things without knowing all the information. And if we react on that, that's a problem. We need to get the information. And so that's why I came in and talked to Ryan. I would just add that I think maybe for the city, for transparency, but even just to help people know, maybe we do a report in the paper on different groups like the roads and the water and others, just what they're doing, what their goals are, what's part of the master plan, just a short blurb in the paper. We can include animal control, police, you know, just maybe once a month, share that as a thought. I mentioned that to Lee and Ryan as possibility. I'm not saying we have to do that.
I think that's a good thing, and Facebook's a good way to do that too, as far as the Roosevelt City Facebook page, letting people know. We do have a lot of followers that way. Paper works, and that was one of the other things that was brought up to the animal shelter is, you know, they really are Roosevelt City entity, and it's not their fault necessarily. It's just neglect that's been there a little bit. But emails, like they don't have an official Roosevelt City email when they're trying to put Facebook posts out there for the shelter. That needs to be done properly through the steps that we have for the police department and the swimming pool and other entities to do the same thing. And so what we're doing is we're bringing them up to speed with how we're doing things everywhere else. And once that happens, you're gonna have that connection of communication and everything else, and the misinformation won't get out there. Unfortunately, it's too late for some of that. And I don't think, honestly, people are gonna believe what they believe. We know what's going on, so I feel comfortable with where we have been and where we're headed. You know, and then I would just caution those that see some of those things to not hesitate to actually call down and find out, you know, really what's going on without any profanity. So anyway, I'll end with it. I'll end my comment with that, but I appreciate the effort that went in there, and we've got a punch list that we're going through. We're gonna make sure like this the ball's not gonna get dropped on us. Nobody's gonna allow that to happen, and those things will be done, because we will not be talking about this, at least as long as I'm mayor again. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else before we end?
I move we adjourn.
Okay. Have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we consider ourselves adjourned unless somebody wants to stay.
Thank you. I'd like to get on the motion.